Widowed millionaire father freezes as the nanny takes on the role of mother with his children. Marcus Sterling stood frozen in the doorway of his penthouse kitchen, his briefcase slipping from his numb fingers and hitting the marble floor with a thunderous crash. What he witnessed in that moment would haunt him forever, not because it was tragic, but because it was so achingly beautiful that it shattered every wall he'd built around his heart. There, in the golden afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, was Elena Martinez, the nanny he'd hired 6 months ago, kneeling on the kitchen floor with his 2 children. 7-year-old Sophie was sobbing into Elena's shoulder while 5-year-old Jake clung to her other side, his small body trembling. But it wasn't the tears that stopped Marcus cold. It was the way Elena held them, the way she whispered words of comfort in both English and Spanish, the way she rocked them gently as if they were her own. "Mommy used to make cookies like this," Sophie was saying through her tears, pointing at the mixing bowl on the counter. "I miss her so much, Elena. Why did she have to die?" Marcus felt his chest constrict. It had been 18 months since Victoria's sudden death from a brain aneurysm, and his children still carried that raw pain. He'd thrown himself into work, building his tech empire into a multi-billion-dollar corporation, believing that providing financial security was enough. But watching Elena cradle his broken children, he realized how desperately wrong he'd been. Elena's voice was soft but steady. "Your mommy loved you both so much, mi amor. And you know what? Love doesn't die. It lives right here." She placed her hand over Sophie's heart. "And here," she did the same to Jake. "Every time you remember her smile, every time you think about how she made you laugh, that's her love still with you." "But it hurts," Jake whispered. "I know, pequeño," Elena said, using the Spanish endearment that had become natural with the children. "It hurts because love is real, but the hurt means you carry something beautiful inside. You all the love your mommy gave you. And guess what? We can honor her by making these cookies together. We can tell stories about her while we bake. What do you think?" Marcus watched as both children's faces slowly brightened. Elena had this gift, this incredible ability to validate their pain while gently guiding them toward healing. It was something he'd never learned to do, paralyzed as he was by his own grief and the crushing responsibility of raising 2 children alone. Over the following weeks, Marcus began to really observe Elena's interactions with Sophie and Jake. He noticed how she never rushed their emotions, never dismissed their questions about death or their mother. When Sophie had nightmares, Elena would sit by her bed singing gentle lullabies in Spanish until the little girl drifted back to sleep. When Jake threw tantrums about missing his mother, Elena would hold him firmly but lovingly, letting him rage until he was ready to talk. But perhaps most remarkably, Elena began sharing stories about her own mother, who had died when Elena was only 12. She told the children about growing up in a small Mexican village, about how her grandmother had stepped in to raise her and her 3 siblings, about how grief had shaped her into someone who understood the precious fragility of family. The first major challenge came when Sophie's school called about concerning behavior. She'd been acting out in class, refusing to participate, and had even gotten into a physical altercation with another student. Marcus felt the familiar panic rising. He was failing as a father, just as he'd feared. But when he arrived home, ready to deliver some awkward lecture about behavior, he found Elena already handling the situation with remarkable wisdom. "Sophie," Elena was saying as they sat together on the living room couch, "tell me what happened at school today. Not what you did. Tell me what you were feeling inside." "I was angry," Sophie burst out. "Madison said her mom was taking her shopping for a new dress, and I got so mad because my mom can't take me shopping anymore. It's not fair." Instead of scolding her, Elena nodded thoughtfully. "You're right, Mija, it's not fair at all. And being angry about that is okay. But when we're angry, we have choices about what to do with those big feelings." What followed was a conversation about healthy ways to express anger, about how to ask for help when emotions felt too big, about how it was okay to feel jealous of other children who still had their mothers. Marcus stood in the hallway, listening and learning more about parenting in those 20 minutes than he had in 18 months of struggling alone. The second challenge was even more complex. Jake began having what could only be described as panic attacks whenever Marcus traveled for business. The 5-year-old would become inconsolable, screaming that Daddy wasn't coming back, that he would die like Mommy did. Marcus was torn, his company needed him, but his son was falling apart. Elena approached this challenge with the same thoughtful care she brought to everything. She created a visual calendar where Jake could mark off each day Daddy was away, with a special celebration planned for Marcus's return. She taught Jake breathing exercises, turning them into games. Most importantly, she helped Jake understand that sometimes adults had to go away for work, but that didn't mean they weren't coming back. "Your daddy loves you more than all the stars in the sky," she would tell Jake during those difficult separations. "And love is like a rope that connects hearts. Even when someone goes far away, that rope of love keeps us connected." But it was Elena's own vulnerable moment that changed everything for Marcus. He came home early from a business trip to find her sitting on the front steps of their Malibu home, tears streaming down her face as she spoke on the phone in rapid Spanish. When she saw him, she quickly ended the call and wiped her eyes, apologizing profusely. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling. My grandmother in Mexico is very sick and Elena," Marcus said gently, sitting beside her on the steps. "You don't have to apologize for being human. What's happening with your grandmother?" Through her tears, Elena explained that her grandmother, the woman who had raised her, was dying. She needed surgery that the family couldn't afford, and Elena felt torn between her loyalty to the Sterling family and her desperate need to be with her abuela. Without hesitation, Marcus made the arrangements. He flew Elena's entire family to Los Angeles, ensuring her grandmother received the best medical care available. But more than that, he invited Elena's family to stay in one of his guest houses during the recovery period. It was during this time that something beautiful began to bloom. Sophie and Jake were fascinated by Elena's younger siblings, by the rapid-fire Spanish conversations, by the music and laughter that filled their usually quiet home. Elena's family embraced the Sterling children as their own, and suddenly the house felt alive in a way it hadn't since Victoria's death. Marcus found himself drawn into this warm, chaotic family dynamic. Elena's uncle taught him to make authentic tamales. Her teenage sister helped Sophie with her Spanish homework. Her grandmother, despite her fragile health, would sit for hours telling stories that captivated both children. But it was watching Elena with his children during this time that made Marcus finally confront the feelings he'd been trying to suppress for months. She wasn't just their nanny. She had become their mother figure in every way that mattered. She celebrated their achievements, comforted their hurts, guided their growth, and loved them with a fierce protectiveness that took his breath away. The realization terrified him. He'd hired Elena to care for his children, not to become the family he'd lost. But as the days passed, he couldn't deny the truth. Somewhere along the way, they'd all fallen in love with her. The crisis came when Elena's visa status became complicated. A bureaucratic error threatened her ability to stay in the country, and Marcus watched his children's world begin to crumble again. Sophie stopped eating, Jake returned to having nightmares, and Elena tried desperately to hide her own panic about potentially having to leave them. "We can't let Elena go away," Sophie told Marcus one night, crawling into his bed with tears in her eyes. "She's our family now, Daddy. She loves us like Mommy did." That night, Marcus made a decision that would change all their lives. The next morning, he asked Elena to meet him in his study. She sat nervously, probably expecting bad news about her visa situation. Instead, Marcus got down on one knee and pulled out a ring. Not the elaborate diamond he'd given Victoria years ago, but something simpler, more meaningful. A ring with 3 stones representing the 3 people who had taught him that love wasn't about perfection or timing, but about choosing to open your heart even after it had been shattered. "Elena," he began, his voice shaking with emotion. "I'm not asking you to replace Victoria. I would never ask that of you or of my children. But somewhere along the way, you became the heart of our family. You brought love back into our home when I thought it was impossible. You showed my children and me that healing is possible, that families can grow in beautiful, unexpected ways." Elena's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "I'm asking you to marry me not just because I love you, though God knows I do, but because you've already been our family in every way that matters. Sophie and Jake don't just need you, Elena. I need you. Will you officially become our family?" Through her tears, Elena whispered yes, and their house erupted in celebration as Sophie and Jake, who had been listening at the door, came running in with joyful screams. The wedding 6 months later was small but perfect, held in their backyard with both families present. Victoria's parents, who had initially been skeptical, had grown to love Elena deeply, seeing how she honored their daughter's memory while creating new traditions for the children. During his wedding speech, Marcus looked out at his blended family, Elena's relatives mixing seamlessly with his friends and colleagues, Sophie and Jake glowing with happiness as they called Elena Mommy for the first time publicly, and Elena herself radiant in a simple white dress that somehow made her look like the queen of his heart. Love, he said, his voice carrying across the garden, is not a finite resource. It doesn't run out when tragedy strikes. Elena taught us that love is like water. It finds a way to flow around obstacles, to nourish new growth, to heal what seems permanently broken. She didn't replace the love we had, she multiplied it. 1 year later, as Marcus watched Elena teaching their new baby daughter her first Spanish words while Sophie and Jake helped, he marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. He'd hired a nanny and gained a family. He'd lost his first wife and found his second great love. His children had lost their mother and gained a stepmother who loved them as fiercely as if she'd given birth to them herself. The little girl in Elena's arms gurgled happily, reaching for her big brother Jake, who made funny faces to make her laugh. Sophie was sprawled on the floor, working on a school project about family trees that now included branches, stretching from Mexico to California to heaven, where Victoria watched over them all with approval. "Daddy," Sophie said suddenly, looking up from her drawing. Elena was right. Love doesn't die, does it? It just grows bigger. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's right, sweetheart. Love just grows bigger." Elena caught his eye over their baby's head and smiled. That radiant, knowing smile that had first captured his heart when he'd seen her comforting his broken children in a sunlit kitchen. She'd taken on the role of mother, not by trying to erase the past, but by honoring it while building something beautiful and new. In the end, Marcus learned that family isn't just about blood or marriage, certificates or traditional structures. Family is about choosing to love, to stay, to heal together, and to create something bigger than the sum of its parts. Elena hadn't just become his children's mother. She'd shown them all how to be a family again. And sometimes, when the light hit the kitchen just right and Elena was laughing with the children over another batch of cookies, Marcus could swear he felt Victoria's presence there too, not jealous or sad, but grateful that her babies were loved so completely, so perfectly, by a woman who understood that the greatest gift you can give children isn't perfection, it's presence, patience, and a love that never gives up. What did you think of Marcus and Elena's beautiful journey from employer and nanny to a blended family, built on love, healing, and second chances? Have you ever witnessed someone step up to fill a role they weren't originally meant for, but did so with such grace and love that it transformed everyone involved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your own experiences with unexpected family bonds or how love has found a way to heal and grow in your life. Your stories inspire these videos and remind us all that love truly is the force that can overcome any obstacle. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that families come in all forms and that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin when we least expect them. Don't forget to subscribe to Trillionaire and Love for more heartwarming stories about love, family, and the incredible ways people transform each other's lives. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a story that might just change your perspective on what it means to love and be loved.